All right, hello everyone. In this video, I wanted to walk through a lab, specifically lab 6 from module 2. Yeah, talk through some of the code and just kind of work through the example with you. So again, in Canvas, in the modules, let's load lab 6. Remember, you want to be clicking through Canvas just to make sure your Zybooks activity is being reported on Canvas and ultimately your grade. All right, so one thing to note while this is slowly but surely loading up, again, for us CIS 12 Python uh, uh, alums, you will recognize this lab. This is literally the exact same lab, or at least the exact same prompt we had when we did, ooh, what's going on here? Error fetching. Okay, yikes, that's not good. Let me refresh this. Okay, look. Okay, good. Now it looks like it's starting up. Okay, good. All right, we're ready to roll. So yes, so sorry. So this is the exact same prompt we had for a Python equivalent lab. So write a program that reads integers usernum and divnum as inputs and outputs usernum divided by divnum 3 times. Note, end with a new line. So that's going to be sort of an important formatting thing for us. Example, if the input is 2000, which can be the user number, and 2 is the div number, the output is going to be 1500 and 250, right? Which is 2000 divided by 2, 1000 divided by 2, and 500 divided by 2. Note, in Java, integer division discards fractions. For example, 6 divided by 4 is 1, where 0.5 is discarded. Yeah, so I think right, very similar to Python in that regard. Something to note again is right. We always have to be mindful when we're dealing with numeric operations. Floats and different and integers are very different, and the way they handle certain mathematical operations are different. So that shows up most readily in division, where for all other operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, two integers will always result in an integer. Division is the one instance where that isn't the case. Now, in programming languages like Python, what ends up happening is that it will automatically coerce to a float. So if you just do a regular division of two integers in Python, it will convert them to floats and then do float division. Here, the default for integer division is going to be integer division. Now, you may remember that from Python, we had those two slashes. Here, obviously, it's just kind of the default. And the key thing to remember is that the performance for this is it won't round up. It won't sort of take a fractional thing. It will just chop off any residual. So the last clean number to divide is what shows up. Anything beyond that is ignored. Okay, so let's sort of take a look at what we're given here. So we're given the shell of the program, but not really much else. And again, sort of a couple things to note here, right? So again, like we said, we're going to be seeing our old friend, the utility scanner, show up um, uh, pretty much for most of the class, right? It's kind of what we're using to take in inputs. Again, it's the utility package that allows a program to read inputs from various sources. In this case, we're just going to use standard input from the console. Um, Again, our program is wrapped within a class, as you probably already have recognized by now. All executable code, ooh, that was a little bit of a tongue twist there. All executable code in Java has to be wrapped within class notation. Um, and so ours included, right? So we're going to create a public class lab program here. And again, you may remember, right, this sort of string here, public static void main, right? Those are the things that we've sort of talked about. Again, these will be sort of muscle memory to you within a week. Public means it's accessible throughout the program anywhere. Static means that this method, the main method you're creating here, is a class level method. So remember the distinction between a class level method and an object method. But a class method means you don't have to instantiate the class. In other words, you don't have to create an object to then execute the method. It can be executed independently because it's part of the class, not the object. We have a void because, again, the program is self-contained. It doesn't have an explicit return statement. And then, right, it's a main, and then it takes in an array of string arguments. In this case, it'll be from command line for us. So that's kind of what we got there. Okay, so what do we have to do here? So first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to need to create a new scanner object because the scanner object is what is going to actually be doing the work of reading in the stuff. So let us do that right now. So I'm going to call in the scanner library, and I'm going to create my new object here. I'm going to say, just do shorthand for I'm going to call it that, equal to, and we're going to say new scanner system in. Okay, and then don't forget your semicolon. Okay, so creating a scanner object, and again, it's going to, in this case, it's going to be taking the input from the console and storing that in that object there. So that's going to be sort of our first object we're going to create. We're now going to initialize a handful of variables. And you may remember, right, one of the big differences conceptually between Python and Java and other sort of languages, that particularly the ones that are compiled, is variables are not plug and play anymore. We can't just sort of create and assign in the same step. We first have to create the variable, essentially allocate the memory, the storage, which, from a compiled program leads to a lot of runtime efficiencies. We create it, and then once it's created, once that memory block has been allocated, we can then assign it. We can then use it. So I'm going to create, and of course we have to type it as well, right? It has to be explicitly typed here. So we're going to create I'm going to call it usernum and int div num. Okay, perfect. So we're going to create both of those things. Now that we've created that, next step is we're going to actually assign those variables. And we're going to do that by grabbing sort of the inputs from the scanner and assigning them to these things. So I'm going to say, so first we're going to assign usernum. So usernum is going to be equal to scanner. We're going to call a scanner method. In this case, we're going to call it the next int method. So the next int method essentially looks for an integer input in the string, automatically assigns that as an integer variable into the user number. Okay, so that's going to be that. We're going to do the same thing for divnum equals scanner next int. Okay, so now that we've grabbed these two, so we've assigned and now we've grabbed them. So first thing I'm going to just do is, before I do anything else, I'm just going to run a very basic print statement because I want to just sort of make sure that the shell is working relatively well. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to do, so again, this is one of those things that you're just going to kind of memorize over time, system out print, and we're going to talk about the differences between print and print line, which we're going to see in a moment, but for the moment, I'm just going to do print usernum plus, add a space here, plus div, because actually, so we can sort of concatenate these things. All right, so now I'm going to just run this. I mean, it's obviously not going to work, but let's just submit, again, make sure that the basic framework is in place. Okay, we got a 0 out of 10. Ooh, okay, what are we doing here? Oh, yep, forgot my semicolon. Fair enough. Again, the idea here is, always test your code as frequently and as regularly as possible. So what I want to try to see here is that I'm at least getting, right, the code is doing what I think it's supposed to be doing. So in this case, you'll see here, okay, taking my inputs, in this case, username or divnum, and it's printing them out to me. So far, so good. Now you'll note two things here. The first thing you will note here is that, right, there's no next line. So we're going to have to format print new line. There's a specific thing. It's going to be a print line versus a print statement, and that's fine. We're going to just kind of get to that when we get to that. But yeah, basic shell now is in place, right? We're taking in our numbers, we're storing them, and we're printing them out. Now we get to the meat of it, which is basically just sort of doing the actual math. So in this case, let's see here. So the first thing we're doing is, right, we take user number, we divide by div number. So that's an easy enough thing. It's just going to be user number. And by the way, we're just going to sort of reassign in real time. So I'm going to, rather than sort of store, I could store different variables, but then I'd have to create a bunch of variables and assign them and things like that. And I'd much rather just do this in sequence. And you'll see why, because I think it's actually kind of nice to do this, well, the way I'm sort of proposing. Because you can sort of do the math, print the result, and not have to sort of overload your program with variables. So in this case, I can just do, so here, actually, let me get rid of that segment right there. There. So I'm going to do that, right? So I do the math and then I immediately print the result. Take a look, make sure. Oh, I didn't do the semicolon. Ah. Yeah, it's another thing you'll notice when you run from program to program. Okay, so again, great. It's mathing, it's doing it, great. So we immediately get that thing there. Now we can basically repeat this thing again. So right now, user num has been reassigned to be 1,000. We multiply it again. Just that line there. That'll get down to 500, and then we print it again. But one thing to note here is we need to have a space here, and you sort of already saw us do that. Easy enough for us to do that. Just add in a string and then print that. Let's see how this is looking now. All right, we're making progress. Got one more to go. So again, and you'll see here, right, because it's a print, not a print line, it doesn't default to printing to a new line. It just continues to print in the same line of the console. Here, let's grab that again. This time, however, we're going to change our notation slightly. In this case, it's going to be a print line instead, because again, we ultimately want it to go to a new line after it's done printing the statement. All right, so let me submit that for grading. And there we go. All good to go. Okay, so again, sort of to recap here, wrapping everything within the class, right? Remember, we're sort of creating this, some things to know here. We're creating the scanner object, and the scanner object is what's taking in the inputs, and ultimately we're using methods from the scanner object to grab the input, convert it to an integer, and then assign that to our respective variables. From there, you're sort of seeing here, we're doing the math and printing it in real time. Rather than sort of doing a lot of variable management, div1, div2, div3, and then just doing a summary print statement, it's just kind of easy just to do a system out print statement, just kind of as you're going through it, and just iteratively updating user number as you're doing it. I think it's a much more efficient, much cleaner representation there. So yeah, so that's a walkthrough of Lab 6. Hope you guys are doing well with the rest of the assignments for the week.